Hello, everyone. Welcome to Buddhist Center. My name's Jeff Allen. Today, we're so fortunate. Once again, we get to listen to the great words of Lama Tsongkhapa in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And some of us have such an incredible relationship with this text because Khyentse Geshe Wandak taught it for around 10 years or even more. But if we look at just the specific teaching that he gave on the Lam Rim Chemo, and not looking at any of the smaller Lam Rims that all fit into it, or Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment that is the root text, just looking at the amount of time that Khyentse Geshe Wandak went over this text is just incredible. So we already have this kind of prior familiarization and relationship with this text. And those of you who don't, I assure you, as you read this text more and more and more, you'll see how deep it is, how vast the ocean of the Lam Rim Chemo is, and how it really condenses the meaning of every single pathway that is needed in order to become a Buddha from anybody's kind of current state of being, wherever they're at. And that's why we see all of these different capacities explained. And we find all of the profound view lineage, extensive deeds lineage, and the lineage of blessings so beautifully packaged for us to look at and to understand. Those really kind masters we have to bow down to and say thank you so much for doing this hard work that allows us to understand how these teachings that Lord Buddha gave, that were figurative and literal and were so vast. When we look at how many, we look at the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center, we have the 100 volumes of the pronouncements of Lord Buddha with hundreds of sutras and tantras and the contents of which I can't even fathom. And then we have the Tanjore, the authentic Indian commentaries. We see the 213 volumes of that contain the thousands of texts. And we're so fortunate that Lama Tsongkhapa and Atisha and these great beings were able to take all of the information in all of those volumes and compact them so small that in Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment we can see all of Lord Buddha's teachings presented, and then a little bit bigger when we look at the abbreviated stages of the path, the Lam Rim Duden, the Song of Experience of Lama Tsongkhapa, and then a little bit bigger in the medium stages of the path to enlightenment, and then fully expressed in the most beautiful fashion in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and then coupled together with the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment, one can see the entire Mahayana path in regards to the sutra vehicle and the tantra vehicle, and how to integrate those two paths into one path to Buddhahood. And it's just so beautiful to be able to see this integrated path of the lineage of blessings, but also combined with the profound view and extensive deeds lineage. And this is what Atisha really gave us, gave Tibet as a gift, was the ability to see the non-contradiction in all of these teachings. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to do a little bit of guided meditation, recite the prayers, then we're going to talk about karma a little. And I think starting next week, we will go back to 10 o'clock teaching. So I'll make that announcement at a more major level, but we'll say it now at the beginning of the teaching next week, because there's going to be a time change in India, and then I'm off for like a week from class. So by the time I think the time change happens and everything, I'll be in line to be able to have class at 10 here. My class should be over that I take in India. And then we'll worry about it until next time the time changes. We'll see what my schedule is by then. So just wanted to let everybody know that this week we'll only be doing the 11 to 12, but next week on we'll go back to 10 o'clock. So let's get into a position that is most suitable for us personally to be able to focus on this teaching. One of the suggestions is the 7-point Vairakana posture. We've gone over this posture many times. I won't go over it today. Just assume the Vairakana posture and begin to, the 7-point Vairakana posture, and begin to breathe in and out of your nose, filling your lungs, your diaphragm all the way, and then exhale, breathing only out of your nose. And as you exhale, count 1. So we're going to get our minds focused. We're going to take our minds off of the street, off of anything except this teaching. So in order to do that, we're going to start getting our minds to a more neutral space, bringing our minds back home to just a calm state from which we can absorb this teaching, absorb these prayers, etc., etc. So let's begin by breathing in and out, filling the lungs and diaphragm fully, and then exhaling. And as we exhale, count the number 1. And breathing in and out, exhaling 2. Breathing in, breathing out, exhale 2. Breathing in, breathing out, exhale 3, and make sure these breaths are very, very even. We'll do this for a minute or so. Breathing in and out, evenly breathing in, evenly breathing out. 1. Now, as you continue to focus on the breathing in and out and the counting, imagine Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of you, about 1.5 inches or so tall, about 2 feet in front of you. Eye height, glowing, radiant, fully enlightened being, Buddha Shakyamuni, however you normally visualize him, or her, if it's another deity, whatever normal object of observation you use is fine. But here we're visualizing Buddha Shakyamuni, we're imagining him, the front generation, as we breathe in and out and count the breath, holding these things only to our mind. Think about how lucky we are, how fortunate we are to have this human basis. We have the ability to think about the most important being in the world that we will become. Buddha Shakyamuni gave us so many gifts. We're able to end our suffering because of the teachings that Buddha Shakyamuni gave. We can get rid of our afflictive obstructions and our obstructions to omniscience, based on what Buddha Shakyamuni taught us. Think about your own personal, individual suffering that you've experienced and have seen. Think about pain, suffering of birth, aging, sickness, death. Think about meeting with unpleasant things and separating from things that are pleasant. Not getting what you want. Not just these words. Think about individual experiences that you've had where you didn't get what you want and how you felt pain and anxiety, separating from things you found pleasant, and the depression that sets in. Becoming sick. Think about these experiences very, very personally. This body you have, how it experiences pain. This mind that you have and how it experiences pain. You didn't ask for a body or mind that experiences pain. Your karma, afflictions, and seeds appropriated this body and mind. There's no certainty. You don't know when you're going to die, and when you do, you'll be separated from all of these ones that you call so dear as love. I love you. We may not see them again until we're Buddha. We may be our enemies in our next life. We may eat them if we're an animal. There's no certainty. This should stir our minds when we think of ourselves being born as an animal, eating our closest loved one. This is the uncertainty of karma. This is what will happen again and again and again. We won't be satisfied. We'll chase after things to try to make us satisfied, to make ourselves satisfied. We'll commit so many non-virtues in the midst of all of that that will keep us coming back for more and more of this uncertainty, more bodies that we'll have to take on and shuck off, more rebirths in the higher and lower realms, in the lower and higher realms, circling through this existence, always thinking that it is the most important one. All of those we hold so dear won't be able to go with us to our next life. As they lean over us as we're dying, the only one who experiences the severing of this life and the moving on to the intermediate state, the looking down on the body that was once mine, will be me, will be my consciousness grasping at it. I will no longer be the Jeff the living. I will be Jeff that's dead, pronounced dead at such and such a time, and I'll be all alone from there. Think about personally how that would feel. How would you feel going through that right now? Again and again and again, forced into these aggregates because of our karma, seeds and the afflictions. Again and again and again, shucking off bodies. The Buddha taught us that these were all results of causes. The Buddha stated that the origin of all of our suffering comes from the ignorance. We look at any phenomena that's impermanent, we see that it comes into being through some sort of cause, because it is a result, it has a cause. The Buddha stated that it's the ignorance that grasps at the I and phenomena as being truly established, as being objectively existent, that causes all of our suffering. He showed us that it's this ignorance that makes us have an inappropriate attention. We grasp at ourselves, we become addicted to ourselves, and then from that addiction, from that attachment to who we are, what we are, how great we are, all these labels that we put on something that can't possibly exist the way that we think that it does. We have some idea that we have some truly existent I that we can find, a findable, identifiable I that is Jeff, a findable, identifiable other that isn't Jeff. And in dependence upon that misconception, I think inappropriately, and then the afflictions arise. I'm addicted to me, so I want that. I become attached. I separate myself from you, and when you do something I don't like, I become angry, and I see you as other, and you're my enemy. All of this is coming from the ignorance that grasps at the I and phenomena as having true establishment, seeing the duality of myself and other, not seeing the subjective reality that is the conventional reality, believing it has some sort of objective existence. And from those afflictions that come from the inappropriate attention, I then act out in contaminated ways through my body, speech, and mind. And then non-virtue causes suffering. And virtue that is contaminated causes more cyclic existence, doesn't cause liberation. So I have to become very, very clear and not confused about what causes all of my suffering, and what suffering is and what suffering isn't. And understanding that the happiness found in cyclic existence is the suffering of change. How do I create happiness that's lasting, that's forever? How do I end suffering forever? When we look at how we get rid of all forms of suffering, pervasive compounded suffering, suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, all those forms, from the manifest to the forms that look like happiness, to that subtle form of suffering that the Buddha really spoke of in the First Noble Truth, the pervasive compounded suffering, this moment by moment thrust into cyclic existence that's happening at all times. In order to get rid of that, we have to find where the very, very root of it is. And we find that it's the grasping at the I in phenomena as being truly established. And then when we act and react with that concept, we will always get more cyclic existence. Because the cause won't have been removed. No matter if we remove some of the actions, or if we remove some of the attachment or some of the anger, we're only temporarily removing it if we haven't gotten rid of its root. And the Buddha said that if you identify exactly what has to be gotten rid of, if you get rid of it, it won't, then what it produces will no longer occur. And the Buddha said that now you know this can all end. I'm telling you, this can all come to a cessation. There can be a cessation of all of this. And one has to rely on a supreme antidote, a supreme wisdom that gets rid of that ignorance. And if you get rid of the root of the tree, it can no longer produce any of its fruit, or branches, or leaves. The tree is no more when the roots are cut. So the Buddha stated that we have to rely on a superior path that's been seen by a superior being, understand the 16 attributes of these Four Noble Truths, that we will know directly when we reach this level where we can directly perceive all of these truths, directly perceive the nature of reality, and that we'll have to do it again and again and again and refine it more and more and more in order to make that wisdom strong enough that it's saturated our mind enough that the ignorance is no more. So now we know it's so wonderful. We can get rid of every single form of suffering that we experience now or in the future. All of it can end. It can come to a permanent place of end. It will be no more. It will be a non-existent thing when we become liberated in whatever form, any of the vehicles. This suffering will now be a non-existent phenomenon for us. It will not exist. Just like a rabbit with horns doesn't exist. So we should feel so happy that we can make within our being, within our experience, the end of suffering a reality, and something that will never ever change. The end of suffering will never change for us. We feel so happy. And the Buddha stated, if you want to have the realization that he or she has, it's necessary to not only want to get out of the suffering and then apply an antidote, we have to also look to others' needs. And that the only way to remove those obstacles to Buddhahood, the obstructions to omniscience, is to combine this wisdom that realizes the correct view, the wisdom realizing emptiness, that one would need to combine with renunciation to achieve the state of abiding nirvana or liberation. Your freedom would occur, but Buddhahood would not. And the reason would be that if you haven't removed the obstructions to omniscience through a path of love and compassion, through the winds of bodhicitta that blow the wisdom to the being of Buddhahood, then only renunciation will cause just the liberation of a hearer, solitary realizer, and abiding nirvana. So we then asked ourselves, what do we need to do in the Buddha states We have to first recognize that all beings have an equal place in our mind in terms of a willingness to benefit them. That since beginningless time, we've had relationships with every single sentient being. They've been our friends, they've been our enemies, they've been strangers to us. They've been our dearest, dearest loved ones and our greatest enemies. And we begin to see how we would help our loved ones right now. And if our loved ones were previously our enemies and our enemies were previously our loved ones, it would make sense if we'll help our loved ones now, that loved ones we've forgotten, we would equally be willing to help. Begin to think about, since beginningless time, how kind they've been to us when they were our loved ones, when they were our closest beings to us in the world, when we were so vulnerable and had no one else. We think about those beings. We think that every single sentient being we've had that relationship with, they've been so kind to us. They've taken care of us when we were so vulnerable. I wish we could repay their kindness in some way, and we understand that when we look at cyclic existence, that happiness in samsara, happiness in cyclic existence is contaminated, so it's therefore the suffering of change. We give them a cookie, or maybe buy them a trip to Hawaii. This will just be in the future a source of suffering for them. We want them to have the happiness that we seek. We think about, well, we wish we could somehow let them have the liberation that we want to have. That's the kind of happiness that's the real happiness. We think about how equally important they are to us. We think about every sentient being wants happiness just like I want it, doesn't want pain just like I don't want pain. The way they feel about pain is the same. The way they feel when they're happy is the same. All sentient beings deserve to have happiness just like I deserve to have happiness. How could I put 10 people in front of me, think about myself and say I deserve happiness more than those 10 people do? How about 100 people? 1,000,000 people in front of me, I deserve happiness more than those people do? They want happiness just as much as I want happiness. We all are equally important. All sentient beings have Buddha nature, just like I have Buddha nature. All sentient beings will be the most important being in the world. We're all equally important. In order for me to establish myself, I have to establish other. In order for this other to establish themselves, they have to establish other as I. There's no inherently existent I or other. We establish each other on independence upon each other, self and other. There has to be other to be self. There has to be self to be other. We see that interdependence, that relationship, when we can't establish a self or other. We can't find an inherently existent self or other, an independent self or other. This independent self that we find so important, we can't find. We recognize that cherishing ourself has brought us to every single pain we've ever experienced. We look at beings that cherish others, and we think about when we've been cherishing others, or states of mind of cherishing others, how wonderful that feels. How wonderful love feels, that happiness that we experience from cherishing others. When one is very, very self-centered, or when I've been self-centered, I think about how that mind feels, so closed, so tight, and how the mind of cherishing others is so open and so full of happiness. Begin to think that you have the ability to actually take on the suffering of others. Hell, hungry ghost, animal, human being, demigods and gods. Imagine that you're taking on their suffering. However you do it, this kind of meditation, imagine that in the form of black lights, you're taking on the suffering of hell, hungry ghost, animal, human demigods and gods, taking on all their individual sufferings. Imagine that you're taking them on. Imagine the form of white light, you're giving them all your individual happiness. Imagine that white lights are sending bodies, your own bodies, to all these sentient beings, transforming your body into a wish-fulfilling jewel and giving them everything that they want. Giving the hot hell beings a little coolness, giving the cold hell beings a little bit of warmth. The surrounding hells, giving them anything that they need. Thinking about the hungry ghosts and allowing them to be satiated just for a moment, and for not to feel the burning of the winds just for a moment on their skin that hurts so much. the burning of the moon on their skin. Make it just quell that for just one moment. Allow their mouth to just open wide enough to eat something, and that mirage to be real food, and their throat to untie so that they could actually swallow the food. Imagine that you're giving them those gifts. Your bodies are transforming into those gifts. And the animals are no longer having to be servants. They can have anything that they want. Imagine that you're transforming yourself into that. Making it so they don't have to fear being eaten by a larger being. Imagine that you're giving them that. They can have anything that they want. Human realm. Imagine all of the things that you can give human beings. All the sufferings that go on. Imagine everything that you possibly can. Imagine that you're giving all of your root virtues, all of your goodness to these beings, making them feel so satisfied and full, all the way up to those beings who are in the highest levels of the path that still have things that they have to remove. Imagine that you're removing any obstacles as you take away the suffering for that removal, and that you're giving them all of that form of happiness that they're seeking, that complete removal of all of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. Imagine that you're doing this for all beings. Imagine now that you've come to the conclusion that other beings' needs are more important than your own. You've actually exchanged this idea that you're the most important one in the world, and now you say everyone else is the most important being in the world. That feeling you had so strongly about that I'm the most important person, you feel that strongly about everyone else, and there's no bias whatsoever. Each and every being is the most important person in the world, including myself. But we are shifting that focus now from myself to all sentient beings. So it's that same force of shift. Remembering the kindness, the great kindness, just reinforcing this idea that we want to be so helpful. Reinforcing this idea. They've been so kind to us. This house, who built this house? Who planted the trees? Who cut the trees? Who made this all possible for me to live in this house? The rug, where did all of the parts of the rug come from? How many people were involved with making it so my feet aren't cold when I walk? How many sentient beings make my feet warm when I walk all over my house and take them all for granted, but my feet aren't cold in the winter on this rug because of so many diverse amounts of sentient beings and all of these different relationships that they have with each other that I depend on for my happiness. And then I decide that I must take on myself this task that I've built up in this gradual fashion, where I've said how nice it would be that all sentient beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they have happiness in the causes of happiness. I will be the cause for them to have happiness in the causes of happiness. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to do this. And then we say, in a building it fashion, how nice it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I will be the cause for them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to do this. And we recognize that we've just asked the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas to bless us to be able to do this. And we say we now have taken on this task to free each and every sentient being from suffering and bring them to a state of infinite happiness and bliss. And we recognize that we don't have the ability to do this. We're stuck in cyclic existence just like all sentient beings are. We haven't been free ourselves. We're like the person laying on the floor with completely all bones broken, laying next to someone else with all their bones broken, thinking we could somehow help them get up. We're going to need the aid of somebody who's qualified, a reliable person to help us both get up. And until I have all of my bones healed and I'm reliable and capable, I won't be able to help that person get up. And until I have the state of omniscience, until I have the state of perfection of compassion, the perfection of wisdom, perfection of power, I won't be able to help all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I won't be able to help all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. I won't be able to bring them to a state of bliss. I won't even know what they need. My little mind can't even imagine how many of them there are. Even a hearer and solitary realizer's mind can't imagine all the sentient beings. Their mind isn't vast enough. How could I help all sentient beings if I can't even think of them all? I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we arrive at this very, very strong notion at this point that I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I have no other choice but to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. In order to fulfill all of my needs and all sentient beings' needs, I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Now, with this in mind, imagine that all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you. Buddha Shakyamuni, Kensei Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Geshe Doje Damdu, Geshe Aga, Geshe Mantenzen Ladranla, Demalocha Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all these holy, holy beings. As many as you can imagine. Imagine the beings of the profound view lineage. Imagine that you see Arya Nagarjuna, Manjushri, and Shantideva and Buddhapalita, Chandrashita, and all these holy, holy, holy beings. As many as you can imagine. Imagine you see the extensive deeds lineage with Lord Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and all these holy beings you see. Imagine that you see the great master Salimpa, Lord Atisha, the Kadampa masters, Dron Tompa. Imagine you see all the great masters in the lineage of blessings, Tilo and Naro, Milarepa, Marpa, all these incredible, incredible beings. Lama Tsongkhapa, all the great beings of the Nyingma Kagyu Sakya and Galupa orders, all the Indian pandits, imagining in the space in front of you, and they're all so happy because they know you just said, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Their only goal is for you to become a Buddha, and it's this mind of bodhicitta that says, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, that is the entrance into that path that will make you a Buddha. And all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas care about is that you become a Buddha. And now they see you, and they're so happy because you're saying, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And they know that you're saying the thing that is the entrance into that pathway that will make you into all they care about you becoming. So imagine they're all so happy, full of bliss. Imagine that you and all sentient beings now are sitting down in front of all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. All sentient beings you imagine you've led here with an infinite number of hands and grabbed them and brought them to this place to be able to hear this teaching, to be able to recite these prayers, to be able to become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. Now all the Buddhas, Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are full of and complete bliss. You see, they're just so happy. You see Kensei Geshe Wandak just so happy that we're continuing on all of these teachings, that we're continuing trying to become Buddhas. That's all Kensei Geshe Wandak wanted, was us to become Buddhas. And you see him, just imagine his face so happy, his Dalai Lama is so happy that we're doing this. And then from that bliss and happiness, imagine that there starts to be like a brewing of nectars and light rays in the colors of white, red, and blue. Just imagine there's like an eruption brewing of light rays and nectars. And then imagine that you and all sentient beings have a white Om on your crown, a red Ah at your throat, and a blue Hum at your heart. White Om representing your body, red Ah representing your speech, and a blue Hum representing your mind. Imagine that you and all sentient beings have these syllables. Now imagine that this brewing, bubbling of light rays and nectar starts to come out and shower down like snow, like rain. Imagine that. And the showering of light rays and nectars transform into, the white light rays and nectars transform into Oms and dissolve into our crowns and all sentient beings' crowns and purify our bodies. The red light rays and nectar shower down and transform into red Ahs, dissolve into ours and all sentient beings' throats, and purify our speech. And then blue light rays and nectars that have been brewing and bubbling begin to come out like snow, like rain, transform into blue Hums, dissolve into our hearts and all sentient beings' hearts, and transforming our mind into pure minds. So imagine this is all happening. Imagine that we're receiving these blessings. We're connecting with the lineage of blessings, the tantric lineage, so that later on we'll be able to do these visualizations. These are very similar visualizations that we do when we do Vajrasattva, purification rituals and so forth. And a lot of the visualizations even we do in Tara. So just imagine that you've been purified. Your body, speech, and mind has been fully purified. And then as you're holding this visualization of all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, and all sentient beings around you, let us recite the Heart Sutra. And as we recite the Heart Sutra, again, imagine that all the beings around you are reciting this, and all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are so happy that this is going on. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra, Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. So just real quickly, the reason that we do the Prajnaparamita mantra in kind of a longer, exaggerated way now is so that you can, as you're reciting the mantra, think about the implicit meaning, the explicit meaning. And as we know, Kensur Geshe Wandak taught us many times, and you see in Jayan Gapi Lodru's commentary, that this stands for, this mantra implicitly speaks about the 5 Mahayana paths, right? The path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. And in the Om, we see 3 syllables in the Sanskrit. So this is, when we look at an Om at the beginning of a mantra, we imagine body, speech, and mind. The body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, and our body, speech, and mind, right? And this transformation, this Om transformation from our body, speech, and mind to the pure body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So when we look at these syllables, the first gate is path of accumulation, second gate, path of preparation, third gate, path of seeing, first gate is the path of accumulation, the second gate is the path of preparation, paragate is the path of seeing, parasangate is the path of meditation, and bodhisoha being the path of no more learning. So as we're reciting this mantra, and you'll see something interesting also, it says, therefore the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. You'll see there's 5 statements made. Those 5 statements refer to the 5 paths also. So this is a very, very summarized text that Jayan Gapi Lodru and Rinpoche have opened up for us. And we should be able to not only see when we recite that mantra. So we're saying, okay, so if we're looking at it in terms of pathways, so first gate is path of accumulation, where you would get bodhicitta, And then take the bodhisattva vows. Do I have bodhicitta? Have I taken the bodhisattva vows? Gate. Then the second gate, path of preparation, is you have these bodhisattva vows. You're an engaged bodhisattva. Now you are trying to get this union of calm abiding and special insight, right? So we're talking about it from the perspective of the not sharp bodhisattva, right? We're getting this union of calm abiding and special insight that you've gotten after you've gotten this, bodhicitta. You've taken bodhisattva vows. Now you get to the second gate. You're getting this union of calm abiding and special insight that's still using conceptuality, that's still using a generic image, is still using a correct sign in order to get at its object. It's not a direct perception of emptiness at that point, at that gate. The paragate is when all of the conceptuality goes away and your mind, just like you can see a form for the first time, your mind directly experiences emptiness without conception at that paragate level. And then your mind gets clearer and clearer through later direct perceptions that occur on the bodhisattva grounds of emptiness during the paragate, parasamgate. So you get paragate, you become a first ground bodhisattva. You've seen emptiness directly. And then parasamgate, your path of meditation, you're going through the bodhisattva grounds, seeing emptiness again and again directly and refining it. All the while you have bodhicitta, right? That's blowing you towards Buddhahood and extinguishing, as you go through it, the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So those bodhisattva grounds you go through, you get up to this 8th bodhisattva ground, and now you no longer have afflictive obstructions, but you're still on parasamgate. You don't have bodhisoha, which is Buddhahood, right? You don't have no more learning yet. You're still on parasamgate, even though you have the same realizations as a hearer, a solitary realizer in nirvana. You no longer have afflictive obstructions. Long story. But at that point now you're on the pure grounds and you still aren't bodhisoha. You're still not no more learning because you have the obstructions to omniscience. So that's all contained. And then bodhisoha is the end of it. It's now you've crossed over to the resultant level of Buddha, right? That's bodhisoha. So when you're reciting this mantra, please don't just, it's not just a song or just some words. Think about the meaning, because the Buddha thought it was important enough to put 5 sentences, then these 5 syllables, right? Gone, gone, gone beyond, right? That's for sharp people to be able to see the meaning inside of. So let's try to look through the lens of a sharp person for a minute, because a dull person will read this and think they could just recite this mantra and become a Buddha. Let's look through the lens of a sharp person while we recite it so that it actually produces a change in our mind. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Deyata ongade ngade baragade barazangade bodhisvadyada ongade gade 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 baragade barazangade bodhisvadyada. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Galajube nejo damba ne nguje duju ngai dudo jendru babo lama yibu jinzi nezung gandro zo la jatzelo aga samara jesandara samara begasamara. Agasamara Jajana Samara Vedi Adonga de Gati Baragati Barazanga de Zoa, Baba Gonjosonjiga, Demidoji, Labadoji, Mebadoji, Jewadoji, Jagi Baji Medoji, Danji, Jeringari Zoa, Kirin Donjaji, Jewada, Midon, Bejan, Andravada, Dumbarunjin, Bomzon, Donjoji, Daji de Jandenda de Lejo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas High, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. The one who transformed into the reliable guide motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector, to you I make prostrations. The one who's eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and the profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays, to you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay, so here we are again. Sunday, we're all living because we're here listening. So we're sentient. We're mind possessors. So we have a lot of conditions that are so fortunate this very moment. We are human basis that will allow us to be able to practice these teachings and study these teachings, but we don't have any idea how long we'll have this human basis for from this moment right now on. And that's really where we always have to be with our Dharma practice, is looking at it in this very, very moment that we're in. I know we don't have a lot of time to talk, and we will next week and the week after, as long as we don't die, right? So that's, what do we have? We have this very, very moment. So when we look at the Lam Rim teachings, we've gone through the first section on the greatness of the teaching, second section, teacher, second section on the greatness of the teaching, third section on how to listen to and explain the teachings, and now the fourth section on how students are actually led through the instructions. We started with the greatness of the teacher, and then we recognize, when we sit down on our cushion and we begin to do analysis of these things, that once we have someone who can instruct us, we have this human basis that's so incredible that we can receive instructions from someone with. We have like the hardware and the software that's necessary to be able to hear from a great teacher, right? So we study the excellent qualities of a teacher, but then the qualities of the student are right in there. That a student has to be open-minded, intelligent, and put in effort, according to Arya Devas in the 400 verses. So we see that we have that, right? We have this human basis that has 8 leisures and, arguably the 10 opportunities, the inner and outer opportunities. We have that right now, but we're going to die. We don't know when. So why there's a sense of urgency. What does that sense of urgency have to do then with these qualities, this karma that we're going to then talk about? Well, it kind of makes us see how every moment that we're creating some sort of potential for an experience in the future, that those moments that we're creating, we better be very careful with, because we can think we have so much time, if we do a few bad things, we have so much time to correct them. Or we can just apply the four opponent powers. I heard someone say that once. We were confronting about some really, really poor behaviors associated with the Chen Rezig Center. And at the end of the day, this person said, it's empty. Don't worry about it. And I can just purify it with the four opponent powers. But the thing that this person was overlooking is that death will come and nothing can stop it. We don't know when we're going to die. You sure you're going to have time to purify it with the four opponent powers? Are you sure that your understanding of emptiness is clean enough to take those four opponent powers and be sure you're directing at it, at that specific thing you did wrong? Because I hear you can't get rid of it until you see emptiness. That's what I'm hearing. So have you seen emptiness? Are you sure you can be so okay with anything that you do, virtuously or non-virtuously, in this life? Are you sure that you have time to put the right amount of stuff in this bucket that you think you need to do in order to purify your negativities and so forth? Because Lama Tsongkhapa says in the text that, we engage in virtue without the view. There's two kinds of ignorance: ignorance about karma and its results, and ignorance about the nature of reality. In virtue, we have ignorance about the nature of reality. It creates cyclic existence still, right? So are we cutting cyclic existence? Have we seen emptiness? So every moment matters. So what are we doing in that moment? What kind of karma are we creating? Are we creating obstacles to us seeing emptiness in the future? Or are we creating the situations conducive to us seeing emptiness in the future? Are we creating the conditions for us, even if we see emptiness, to see it with such selfishness still, a little bit lingering, that we're going to have to be in an abiding nirvana and we won't even fulfill all of our own needs? Are we sure that we have abandoned self-interest enough that if we even see emptiness, that our self-interest has been abandoned enough to not make us have to, as I believe one of the great Kadampa masters says, if you end up in an abiding nirvana and then have to come up and have the Buddha tell you you're not done and then go through the path again, it's like someone who crossed a river holding all their clothes over the top of their head and then goes and does it again. You already got to the other side of the river. Now you just take a boat back, go and then be like, start again, and have to go walk across the river with your clothes over your head again. So every moment really matters when we realize that we don't know when we're going to die. And then we realize that every moment we're creating something that's going to create an experience. Is it creating an obstacle? Is it going to create suffering? Or is it going to create happiness? I need a human basis, right? If I want this leisure and opportunity, if I don't see emptiness, if I don't see emptiness before I die, if I don't have an inferential valid cognition of emptiness before I die, I'm going to need a human basis that I can do this again from, right? In order to get a human basis, what did Rinpoche always say? You need three things. You need ethics, you need a practice of the six perfections, and you need stainless, flawless, aspirational prayers. Do we have those? Are we going to get this basis again? Because that's the karma you need to get this basis. Do you have an inferential valid cognition of emptiness? I don't. Am I maybe going to die? Even while I'm teaching right now, I may. That's the urgency that we start to understand when we're going to get into karma next week when I can talk longer about it. But when we understand that we have intentions that are happening in our mind, and then these intentions in our mind are turning into actions of our body and our speech, think about your mind. Think about, it's hot, I'm hot, I'm thirsty, I need this, I need that. Just think about your mind, like going from one thing to another, and think about that all of that's just creating your world later. Would make sense to do what the Buddha said. Abandon evil. Accumulate as much virtue as possible. Subdue your mind, right? You know, right there we see renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. Abandon non-virtue, renunciation, right? Abandon evil. Get as much virtue as possible. What's the most virtue you can get? Bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the gold-making elixir that transforms this yucky thing, body, into the body of a Buddha, says Shantideva. Bodhicitta is the highest virtue, right? Subdue your mind. How do you subdue your mind? You get it calm enough to see emptiness. Right? So we see that these things have to happen if we want even the lowest levels of liberation. We want the low enlightenment, right? The lesser enlightenment. If we want those, we have to at least get renunciation and the wisdom realizing emptiness in our mind, right? If we want the lower, we still have to have this emptiness understanding. We have to have renunciation, right? But if we want that Buddhahood, we have to have no self-interest. It says if you've attached to your own self-interest. Now you have self-interest. It says attached to your own self-interest. You obviously have self-interest. You want to fulfill your needs and all sentient beings' needs, right? But why do we know that? Because we're studying the great texts. We know Lama Tsongkhapa said, you don't abandon this idea you want to become a Buddha. You just know you can only do it if it's for the sake of everyone. You put others' needs before your own. It's like smart self-interest. Right? But we have to be able to look at all of these things and understand how they relate to our minds and how they relate to our lives. So that when I'm going each moment through my life, I'm making the use of each one of those moments, and I'm being the creator of my next illusion. Right? I want to start to create what appears to me. I don't know about you. And the only way I can start to create what appears to me is by getting smarter. Right? You know, if I can first get smarter by not apprehending it, like being not as fooled, like my mind, like, I don't believe it as much. But eventually I'll be able to get smart enough to change the way it looks altogether. And that's what a Buddha's done. So every moment is important if every appearance is wrong. Right? If you're realizing that the Buddha's every moment, their appearance is correct, what appears to them is correct, right? Every moment is non-mistaken, is correct, right? Imagine every moment that we're mistaken that has to be fixed, and how we have to, if there's 65 within, it's not even a second. It's funny, Terry and I were talking about this. It's actually, because science says there's 1,000 moments in a second, you know, and was there some ancient measurement? Well, it's actually this, you know. And I was testing it. I was taking my iPhone with the stopwatch, and I was going, seeing how many I could get into a second. And then to try to do the math, 65 times anyway. I ended up at like 500, if anybody's, you know, I don't know. But maybe Buddha. Imagine how fast the Buddha could snap his finger, right? So maybe the Buddha can snap it so fast. So who knows? It's just how long that reverberates, really. And it's debated also. So anyway, 12:01. So anybody has any questions? I see Lorinda has a question. Unmute. Anybody who has heard Geshe Damdu teaching, when he calls on you, that's the first thing he says, unmute. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Okay. I meant to ask this to Rinpoche before he passed. No, it's okay. It's and I guess the question is, you know, as we're always talking about impermanence and death and being prepared for that based on study and path, I recently have been thinking about like the different forms of death and how they can sometimes be like really violent and really sudden. Like you all of a sudden are driving and you're in this crash and you're burning to death on the spot, let's say. Okay. So you're not laying in your bed just calmly doing your death meditations. Like sometimes, like in different stages of me studying and preparing with death meditation, I'm always like this old lady, like that's like 98, like in this soft bed, like
yes,
meditations. and I just know that that's like, that's not being prepared. So what I want to know is someone like me that's like super just low, like not practiced a lot and has a lot of path to still do. If we're saying Te ata om gate gate par sam gate bodhi soha, let's say it's the time of death and that's like the only thing we can go to. Like we just have like, because we're so flustered, we're just flustered. If you don't have bodhicitta, so you're at the Teata Om Gate Gate, and then you're at the Par Gate. I guess I just want to know what to do at the time of death if I'm like really having a tough, extreme time.
No, it's great question.
And I don't
Great
know,
question.
it's not like one fits everybody. I get it. So what do you have to say about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, why would you be thinking about death when you're around me? I love to, talk about this topic because it's so crucial. So what are you thinking about? So yes, it's very, very easy for us to fool ourselves, right? To think that at the time of death, we're, very calm, right? We're somewhere quiet, the right conditions around us, and we're able to dissolve elements, right? And then somehow end up at this clear light mind, and then, some of us will even like create this illusory body, right? Like we read these things, but are they really realistic for us? They will be realistic for us eventually, but what to do in the circumstances mentioned? And that's what separates you from a practitioner. If when adverse circumstances happen, you can turn them into the path. And that, death is the most, adverse I could think of, right? As you're dying, that's it, right? But as you're dying, that's a very adverse moment. And the more you have control of your mind, obviously, the quicker you can bring it to where you're at as a practitioner. In the moment of death, you might only have a few moments if it's sudden. I don't know what, there's always probably a lead up. If a plane's crashing, there's a lead up that your mind, you have some time. Maybe a quick car crash, there wouldn't be such a lead up, but every circumstance would be different. But it would be how quickly can you, in adverse circumstances in your life right now, harness that mind? Because it's going to be worse than anything you can think of now, right? And that's why we practice so hard when things make us angry. We try to change that mind really quickly because those are all emotions that are going to come up at the time of death. So our practice now, first of all, that's why it's so important. And it's why I spend so much time with this meditation on thinking about suffering and thinking about, the fact that we will die and death will come and nothing can stop it. We don't know when. It's so that when we get to that point, we aren't surprised. So our lack of surprise, then we know what to do. In the 7-point thought transformation, it says, I can die with no regrets. That doesn't mean like, oh, I'm just... everything I've led a good life, It doesn't mean that in the context of Buddhism. It means that I can sit through this death process and know that I've been a spiritual practitioner, so that I don't have anything to worry about in my next life. I don't regret having not done what I needed to do to be prepared. So what does one do if you're not prepared, right? Like me, or not fully prepared? You do the best you can. You bring Rinpoche, you bring the Guru right to mind. Would be my suggestion. This isn't me giving, advice as a guru. What would I do? Bring the Guru right to mind, and then bring the deity and the Guru inseparability right to mind. Generate yourself as a deity, if you have a highest yoga tantra practice, right? Try to generate love and compassion. You can, you can't have like opposing emotions at the same moment in a mind. And that's why each moment's so important. That's why we look at our mind. It's so that in those moments you can really harness and you can try to, generate this love and compassion, see it as empty, right? Method and wisdom. Try to produce whatever method and wisdom you can at that moment. I guess that's the best answer. Produce whatever method and wisdom you can at that moment, depending on how long you have, depending on how much practice you've put in. Everybody will be different. There's a varieties of experiences because of varieties of karma. And can we be certain that, we are ready? As I was talking about a week or two before, is there grasping still? Do we have the view? Do we have self-centeredness? Are we attached to this life? Are we attached to next life, right? These are all questions that the mirror of the Dharma, we ask ourselves. And if we say we're attached to this life, the reason it says this, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner, you're in trouble when you're dying. Think about it. If you're attached to this life, you will die with regrets because you'll be afraid, because you won't have prepared for a journey. You'll be like someone who goes out, on a trip that's going to take a week but doesn't bring any food with them. And now all of a sudden you're on this trip and you have nothing to eat because you didn't prepare. And that's really what the great masters compare it to, We got to go on this trip. We better be prepared for the trip we're going to go on. It may be tomorrow, it may be in 40 years, 50 years, but we're going to go on that trip. And we don't know if it's, in a minute or in 40 or 50 years. So we better make sure that we're packing up provisions so that we will die with no regrets, as the great Kadampa masters say. So we do the best we can at the moment, try to get as much method and wisdom together at that moment in time, however long we have, try and invoke the Lama. Get our minds into a positive state, because the state of our mind at the time of death is going to dictate where we kind of are thrown into the intermediate state. So we have to just try to bring a positive state of mind, first and foremost, any positive state of mind. But then we go deeper into Buddhism, right? Method and wisdom. You asked me what I would do, right? So I gave you an honest answer. What I would do.
Helpful.
But what I would do first is go, no, why me? And then I would go, oh yeah, why me? Because I'm, I'm birth, aging, sickness, and death. I'm going to die. All compound things are impermanent, right? And I'm the kind of impermanent thing that has a time limit, I'm not the kind of impermanent thing that doesn't stop until there's some special force. I have expiration date. I can't live 200 years. So anyway, that's enough out of me. Thank you all for being 10 minutes longer than I should have gone patient. But all incredible points. If you are attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. And again, I apologize for going over. I try not to do that. Please have mercy on me. Okay, here we go. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Azandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. That's right. In the Pure Land, surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. I almost read Rinpoche's long life prayer. I pray that in all our lives, may we never be separated from Khensur Geshe Wandak, whatever form he or she chooses to emanate in, whether it's the emanation body in ordinary forms, where we could meet now, or the enjoyment body when we become Arya Bodhisattvas, May we always meet with him or her in all of our lifetimes until we become a Buddha. And when we are Buddha, may we help him or her bring all sentient beings to a state of Buddhahood. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you all. We'll see you on Thursday for a surprise what it's going to be. If anybody has any special requests, let me know. A couple requests have come in from Lorinda about stuff. So anybody have any other things, let me know. And yeah, have a great week and try to apply these teachings to your mind. And make the answers that you have to those questions about, are you attached to this life? Are you selfish? Are you attached to samsara? Do you grasp? To be a little bit better, right? When we get to Thursday than they are today. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week. I appreciate all of you so much.